Welcome back to the Voice of Business podcast. We're here at Bennett's. A big thanks to Bennett's for providing this beautiful showroom for us to shoot in, and Janice at Digski Media for producing this podcast. My guest today, Tori Silvera, and big thanks for joining us. You're the co-owner over at Wild Rock.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so we've seen a lot of changes over at Wild Rock. You know, all of us have known Scott and Kieran over the years, big fixtures in our community. And but now there's a new ownership group. And I know we had Scott talk about that, the transition at our business summit last year. And maybe you can talk a little bit about what it's like being part of an employee buyout and running, taking over a very successful business in Peterborough.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would say, it's amazing. That is how I would start. I would say that leading up to the business transition, so I had worked at Wild Rock for about 8 years prior. So it wasn't anything new to me. And I was in a position as the general manager at that time and had been for a couple of years. And leading up to the ownership transition, I had this naive belief that it would be very much the same, that the job I was doing wouldn't really change all that much, and that I wouldn't feel all that different in an ownership position. And I can honestly say that the day after the ownership transition was official and I was part of that group, I was really hit with the weight of that responsibility of owning a business. And all I can say is I'm so grateful that I was with a team at that time and had the mentorship of Scott and Kieran, because I don't know how people do business alone. And you look out there in the world and there are lots of folks that are doing really amazing things. And I'm sure they have support teams behind them. But yeah, I'm just super grateful that Scott and Kieran and John were there with us along the way.
Yeah, well, even hearing Scott and Kieran's stories about when they started it, right? Like, I don't think any business owner has that. Those first couple years were great and stress-free, right? It's like, here's where we were at rock bottom, and then we built up to something decent, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little different to start partway in and have all that support network around you, I'm sure.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
And now, the business itself has been in the community for 30 years, and like you said, you've been involved with it for 8. What's behind that passion for wanting to do this type of work and take that over?
Yeah, well, when I started at Wild Rock, I didn't know anything about, I started in our bike department, and I didn't know anything about bikes. I didn't even know the difference between a wheel and a tire. But I got in there, and they were really gracious about teaching me everything, and I have always been really passionate about the outdoors, camping, particularly rock climbing, which is my first love. And so that's why I'm there. And I get to go to work and work with a bunch of people that I really like every day, which I think is pretty special. I don't think everybody gets to say that.
Yeah.
And so, I'm really grateful to work with a bunch of people whose lifestyles really align with mine, and we support each other doing what we love to do outside of work as well.
Yeah, no, I've always been impressed with Wild Rock, especially in the retail sector, the amount of people who they're always there, right? Like, there's not a ton of changeover, which is not particularly common in that sector. So it must be a good place to work. Now, one of the things that you've been part of since working there is kickstarting the Unity project. And I'm wondering if you can give us a bit of background about what led to, being a business-led initiative and sort of what it is right now.
Yeah, for sure. So the Unity project started, there were a group of downtown business owners and downtown stakeholders sitting around a table one night after a different meeting and expressing a lot of frustration and honestly fear about what we're seeing out there in the world with the addictions and housing crises, and also how those are affecting downtown business. So us as folks who work, and some of us live downtown. And so this idea came to light that we find a way to access a service that can help us with intervening in non-criminal situations. So of course, if somebody's in the store and there's some theft or something happening, we would call the police, and they're really wonderful about responding. But a lot of the time there's something non-criminal happening, and we just need somebody who's really experienced and trained in de-escalating. And so what the Unity Project is a couple of outreach workers who have a ton of experience doing this, and they are walking the downtown streets. They're going into businesses and connecting with business owners, and they're chatting with staff, and they're also out on the street handing out coffee and getting to know other community members as well. And the real advantage of that is that we at Wild Rock can call we call them on their cell phone and they'll come and respond and help us de-escalate, and they already have relationships with us, with the staff that's calling, with the community member maybe that needs help, and so that's made it really successful, and I'm really excited about how it's gone so far.
Yeah, and just ourselves as a Chamber of Commerce, we've used that service quite a few times at our location, and it's nice to have people that you can call who do have those established relationships, right? Like, you're not looking for a police presence, you've got somebody who obviously needs a bit of assistance, and have someone who's just going to come and help connect them with those services in a compassionate way is just such a nice resource to have. So really appreciate the work you guys have put into this. So, and just sort of on that note, you know, when we talk about the social issues that businesses end up dealing with, we focus a lot more on the problem side of it. And it's interesting to see, you know, when businesses do become part of the solutions on this. I'm wondering if you have any other ideas as far as like opportunities that businesses have to be part of solutions on whatever the social issue might be in our community.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big question. I would say that I can't necessarily decide that for every individual and business owner. But what you're talking about, that understanding that our social issues and our business issues are not separate and that we're all part of one fabric. A metaphor that Kieran often uses when he's talking about the Compassion Project is that our community is a fabric, and that we all have to come together to weave what that is and make it a beautiful thing. And I think that's a really nice imagery, but also is really true. And I think in business, we sort of get caught up in, you know, our business community, and we're super busy as business owners and as staff, and but we're all the same community, and we all need to support each other, because without that sort of greater social community, business wouldn't thrive, and without our business, I think our outdoors community wouldn't be as rich as it is. So yeah, that's where it starts, I think. And then we all need to show up and honor that in our own way, whatever that means.
Yeah, for sure.
People. Yeah,
for sure. And I'm sure part of this comes with you know, the type of market that you're dealing with too. But Wild Rock has always been a leader on the environmental side of things. And I'm part of the Green Economy Peterborough group, and you know, I've often heard Scott and Kieran, you know, talking about the different initiatives that have happened in the past at Wild Rock, and like even keeping track of your carbon footprint isn't something that I think most businesses are doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know there've been some tough decisions made along the way as far as, you know, trying to do what's right and still balance things out with what you're trying to achieve as a business. And I'm wondering, you know, what does that mean on that sustainability, climate change front from a business perspective, where, you know, often as a retailer, there's not always a lot of things that people see within their control, right? You've got your supply network, you have your footprint of your building, and there's not a whole lot beyond that. So I'm just curious, you know, what this means for your business and what types of things that you're doing on that end.
Yeah. You're giving me some heavy hitters. Well, I would say, I mean, Scott and Kieran were really ahead of their time, and Jonathan as well, in terms of their understanding of how even a business as small as Wild Rock or any other small business, can impact climate change, and that we can contribute to not only our community sustainability, but the world at large. And yeah, I would say something we always try to do. I mean, of course, we're tracking. We look at our own carbon emissions. We look at our own, you know, even just our garbage output and things like that. And when we're ordering product, that's a huge part of how we make our decisions, is whether these businesses that we're ordering from are using sustainable practices, whether they're treating their workers fairly. You know, those are really big factors when we're deciding what we're going to carry, both brands and products. And that's something else we're really passionate about trying to do, is trying to push those vendors to make more sustainable decisions. Because we're, you know, Wild Rock is, in the grand scheme of things, we're pretty small. Yeah. But, you know, when you're looking at a vendor that we might have, like Patagonia or Keen or something like that, they're all really working toward being more sustainable. And if we can continue to push that and support that, I think that that's what really makes an impact. Because if we all did that, then those vendors would make that a priority.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important.
Okay. Well, on the subject of supply chains and that, you know, a lot of businesses have different pain points that they've struggled coming out of the last few years. What are the challenges that you're facing, you know, business-wise right now?
I would say the biggest difficulty right now is that we don't have a baseline. And what I mean by that is that for years, decades even, the way that we did our forecasting and we predicted what was going to happen the next year was we looked at the last few years and we said, okay, well, inflation's going to be, you know, a little bit,
Yeah,
and so we'll
2.5% or something.
Yeah. And so probably we will spend and sell a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how we made our predictions. And of course, there's some variability in there, but generally that was somewhat reliable. But as I think everybody knows, the last few years have not gone that way. And so right now, I know in the outdoor industry and in, I'm sure in all retail and restaurants and small business, we're just trying to figure out how we make our predictions. How do we know if we're doing better or worse than what is average? Because we don't know what average is, and that's a really challenging thing coming out of, I would say we're still kind of coming out of COVID in that way. There's still lots of supply chain issues out there that are affecting us as well. And so figuring out, like, how do we know if we're doing a good job? And how do we adapt to that is the hardest thing right now.
Yeah, well, and I know the speech I've heard from Scott before in the past was, it's all about controlling your costs, right, to be financially successful. And if you're overstocking because you don't know what your market's going to be buying, that makes things very challenging, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now, coming out of COVID, like we got very outdoorsy over the last 4 years. Was that something that was more of a trend, and now that lives have largely gone back to normal, we're a little lazier and a little less outdoorsy, or are we a healthier society coming out of this?
I think we're healthier. At least I can speak for Peterborough and say that not only are more people that are, Peterborough based doing more outdoor stuff, and we haven't really seen a huge decline in that way. The thing that we're seeing a lot of is people that started doing outdoorsy stuff during COVID. Maybe they bought their first tent and they went camping for the first time. Now they're starting to upgrade. They really enjoyed it, and they're getting something better, which is really exciting. And also we gained a lot of people that came from GTA or from Ottawa or wherever it was that wanted a somewhat quieter community.
Yeah.
And so our community has certainly grown in that way, our outdoors community. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon. I hope it doesn't.
I mean, it's great seeing so many more people enjoying our outdoors. I've certainly made some referrals when I'm out backcountry about where'd you get that? Oh, that's all from Wild Rock. So.
Excellent.
Thanks so much. Let's just sort of wrap things up. Anything exciting coming up from Wild Rock?
Well, I can say we have a lot part, but I don't want to make any promises in the podcast that I have to live up to later.
Fair enough.
But yeah, if people want to follow along and subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on social, that's definitely where we make most of our announcements. So, or just come visit us and tell us your adventure stories, and we'll tell you ours.
All right. Well, Tori, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.